Welcome to another episode of The Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something really special. Excerpts from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
Yes, and with these passages, we're really trying to go deeper than just the plot summary. Our mission here is to unpack the key insights, the character stuff, the societal commentary that Austen weaves in so brilliantly.
Absolutely. Trying to get to the core tensions and maybe the big reveals that these specific bits show us.
Exactly, and it all kicks off, doesn't it, right there in Meryton?
Oh, yeah, with that famous line, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife."
Sets the whole stage immediately. It's all about, well, money, class, and the whole marriage game.
Totally. And that first big scene we get in these excerpts, the Meryton Assembly, it just throws you right in.
It really does. That's where we first meet the key players and see how this world operates.
You have the arrival of Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy, and the difference is just stark.
Right. Bingley comes in. He's described as lively and unreserved, dances every dance. He's, clearly having a good time, engaging with everyone.
He's the instant popular guy.
Whereas Darcy, well, he's the opposite. He dances, twice?
With his own party. Yeah, and the rest of the time he's just sort of pacing, looking aloof, refusing to be introduced or dance with anyone else.
And boom, judgment made. The source says his character was decided. He's the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world. Just like that.
It happens so fast, based on really just a few actions and how he carries himself. Appearance and expectation,
And you can see why someone like Mrs. Bennet reacts so strongly. Her whole focus, driven by their financial situation, is getting her daughters married off well.
Oh, definitely. She's ecstatic that Bingley danced with Jane twice, and she immediately clocks his income nearly £100,000.
That urgency, even if it seems a bit much sometimes, it comes from a real place. The pressure was immense for families like the Bennets.
Though it's interesting, you get little hints of other views, like Miss Lucas saying Darcy maybe has a right to be proud, given his wealth and standing.
That's a good point. It shows it wasn't completely black and white, even then. But the main takeaway is how fast those first impressions, tied to wealth and behavior, just lock in.
Okay, so then the action moves a bit. We follow Elizabeth over to Netherfield because Jane is sick.
Right, and her arrival itself is kind of a statement.
Yeah. She walks 3 miles, shows up looking, well, the text says, weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing. Not exactly arriving in style.
Definitely sets her apart from the more polished atmosphere there, as Bingley certainly notices.
And Netherfield itself, it's this environment of, subtle social combat, isn't it?
Very much so. You see Miss Bingley constantly trying to get Darcy's attention, usually by putting others down, especially Elizabeth.
But this is where we get those great verbal clashes between Darcy and Elizabeth. They're not just making small talk.
No, definitely not. That conversation about what makes an accomplished woman, it's fantastic.
Darcy lays out this impossible list of requirements.
And Elizabeth just wittily pushes back, basically saying she's never met anyone who fits the bill. It shows they're on the same intellectual level, even if they disagree.
And the whole pride versus vanity discussion.
Oh, yes. Darcy's comment about pride being under control only with real superiority of mind. Coming from him, it's, quite revealing of his own mindset.
Elizabeth seems more amused than offended, though. She sees through it.
She does. And despite Miss Bingley trying her best to keep them apart, Darcy's starting to notice Elizabeth more. The source even says he feels the danger of it.
So that initial dislike is already getting complicated. There's an attraction there, maybe intellectual at first.
Exactly. It shows how, beneath the surface judgments, real connection can start to bubble up, challenging those fixed first impressions.
Okay, so just as things are getting interesting between them, new people show up. Mr. Collins arrives at Longbourn.
Ah, Mr. Collins, yes. Yeah. His arrival is tied into the whole entailment situation. He's the one set to inherit the Bennet estate.
Right. And he comes with this idea of marrying one of the Bennet girls to sort of make up for it.
Pretty much. To make the loss to them might be as little as possible, as he puts it. And his character is just instantly clear from how he talks.
So pompous. All that talk about his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and describing her house, Rosings, in minute detail.
He's completely defined by his connection to her. A total sycophant.
And Mrs. Bennet, practical as ever, once she figures out Jane might be taken by Bingley, she quickly points Collins towards Elizabeth.
At the same time, you have the militia arriving in Meryton, which causes a whole different kind of excitement.
Especially for the younger Bennet girls, Lydia and Kitty. They're obsessed.
And the militia brings Mr. Wickham onto the scene.
Who is described as instantly charming, right? makes a great first impression, especially on Elizabeth.
He does. And then you get that really awkward, silent encounter between him and Darcy and Meryton. The tension is obvious.
Which Wickham immediately uses to his advantage. He spins this whole sob story to Elizabeth.
About how Darcy cheated him out of a legacy promised by Darcy's father. A complete fabrication, as we later find out.
But Elizabeth buys it completely. Why? Because she already dislikes Darcy.
Exactly. It fits her prejudice. It's a perfect example of how easily charm and a convincing story can sway opinion, especially when you're already biased. Deceptive appearances are a huge theme here.
So all this leads to some major proposal drama. First up, Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth.
And what a proposal. It's less about feeling and more like a business presentation. He lists his reasons.
Duty to Lady Catherine, his own clergyman's status needing a wife, how he chose her. And he even mentions her dowry, saying it's not important, but still stating the amount.
It's incredibly self-absorbed and, frankly, insulting.
No wonder Elizabeth turns him down flat. Immediately, no hesitation.
Which, of course, throws Mrs. Bennet into hysterics. She can't believe Elizabeth would refuse such a, quote, advantageous match.
But then Mr. Bennet steps in. His dry wit is just perfect, telling Elizabeth that if she doesn't marry Collins, he'll never see her again. But if she does, her mother won't.
It shows his quiet support for her choice, even if he's usually quite hands-off.
Then, almost immediately, we see the alternative path through Charlotte Lucas.
Right. Elizabeth's friend. The source makes her perspective very clear. Marriage isn't about romance for her. It's about security, a home, not being a burden.
So when Collins is rejected by Elizabeth, Charlotte makes her move.
It's described as a deliberate scheme. She sees an opportunity for the security she needs and takes it, accepting Collins' proposal herself.
It's such a stark contrast, Elizabeth's idealism versus Charlotte's pragmatism.
And you can't really judge Charlotte too harshly, given the limited options for women like her back then. Her choice makes a sad kind of sense within that society.
While Charlotte secures her future, trouble is brewing elsewhere. Lydia's obsession with the militia officers intensifies.
Yeah, she becomes particularly friendly with the wife of Colonel Forster and gets invited to go with him to Brighton, where the regiment is relocating.
Elizabeth has a bad feeling about this. She sees how imprudent Lydia is and tries to talk her father out of letting her go.
She voices real concern about Lydia's character and the potential dangers.
But Mr. Bennet, well, he's pretty passive about it. He figures Colonel Forster will look after her and maybe believes she's too insignificant or poor to attract serious trouble. A rather cynical view.
It's a fateful decision because, of course, the worst happens. News arrives. Lydia has run off with Wickham.
The way they find out is brutal, too. A flippant note from Lydia herself, and Jane relaying the awful details in distress.
The family is thrown into chaos. Mrs. Bennet collapses. Mr. Bennet is genuinely distraught, realizing his mistake. And Elizabeth.
She has that horrible moment of clarity, realizing Wickham likely never meant to marry Lydia, and that Lydia's own foolishness made her vulnerable. Her previous good opinion of Wickham is just destroyed.
It's a massive scandal. The family shame is immense, and the absolute priority becomes finding them and forcing a marriage to salvage some shred of respectability. Mr. Gardner has to rush to London to try and sort it out.
In the middle of all this, though, the plot takes Elizabeth away briefly. She goes to visit Charlotte, who's now Mrs. Collins, in Hunsford.
Which puts her right in the path of Lady Catherine de Bourgh at Rosings Park.
Oh, Lady Catherine, what a character.
Isn't she? The source paints her as completely overbearing, obsessed with status, constantly interfering, asking intrusive questions about everything. Money, connections, education.
She's the embodiment of aristocratic arrogance and entitlement, very controlling.
And while Elizabeth is there, who should arrive but Mr. Darcy and his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam.
This leads to a few crucial conversations. Elizabeth gets a little dig in at Darcy about his awkwardness at the Meryton ball.
And then Colonel Fitzwilliam, totally unaware of the implications, casually mentions that Darcy recently saved Bingley from an imprudent marriage.
Confirming Elizabeth's suspicions that Darcy was the one who broke up Jane and Bingley.
Exactly. And this new resentment, combined with everything else, is simmering when Darcy does something completely unexpected.
He proposes to Elizabeth, right there at Hunsford Parsonage.
But the way he proposes, it's almost designed to fail. He talks about his feelings, yes, but also about how much he struggled against them because of her inferior connections, her family's issues.
He basically lists all the reasons not to marry her while asking her to marry him. It's dripping with pride.
Unsurprisingly, Elizabeth is furious. She lays into him. his pride, his role in splitting Jane and Bingley, and what she still believes is his cruel treatment of Wickham.
It's a fierce rejection, and it forces Darcy to actually explain himself.
Right. He defends his actions regarding Bingley, saying he genuinely believed Jane wasn't interested based on her very reserved behavior.
And then he drops the bombshell, the real story about Wickham.
He reveals Wickham wasn't cheated, but chose money over the church living, wasted it, and then, worst of all, tried to elope with Darcy's own young sister, Georgiana, purely for her inheritance.
This changes everything for Elizabeth. Darcy follows up with a letter detailing all this.
And reading that letter is the turning point for her. She's forced to confront her own prejudice, how quickly she believed Wickham's smooth story, because it fit her dislike of Darcy.
She realizes she completely misjudged both men. It shatters her certainty.
It's a powerful moment of self-awareness, showing how pride on his side and prejudice on hers created this huge misunderstanding.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. Elizabeth is now traveling with her aunt and uncle, the Gardiners, and they end up visiting Pemberley, Darcy's estate.
And she's actually really impressed by the estate itself, but more so by what the housekeeper says about Darcy, how kind and fair he is as a master. It starts to soften her view further.
But then, bam, while she's there, she gets the letters from Jane about Lydia's elopement.
Terrible timing. And who should appear right as she's absorbing this awful news? Darcy himself. He sees her distress.
Later, after the immediate crisis seems averted, Elizabeth gets another letter, this time from Mrs. Gardiner, and it contains the real story of how Lydia was found and married.
And it turns out it was Darcy. All Darcy. He tracked Wickham down using information from a disgraced former governess.
He then negotiated with Wickham, paid off his huge debts, and provided a very significant sum of money to make him marry Lydia.
All done secretly, enduring, as Mrs. Gardiner puts it, considerable trouble and mortification, dealing with people he despised.
And why? Mrs. Gardiner suspects and tells Elizabeth her heart did whisper that he had done it for her. For Elizabeth.
It's an incredible act, showing a depth of character and hidden selflessness completely at odds with that initial impression of pride.
The family reactions back home are telling. Mrs. Bennet is just over the moon that Lydia is married, totally ignoring the scandal and the cost.
While Mr. Bennet is deeply ashamed, realizing Mr. Gardiner must have paid Wickham off, and feeling the weight of his own earlier negligence.
Lydia and Wickham even visit Longbourn, showing zero shame. Lydia casually let slip that Darcy was at the wedding.
Which confirms things for Elizabeth, and Mrs. Gardiner's letter also heaps praise on Darcy's character, subtly encouraging Elizabeth's potential feelings.
Meanwhile, Bingley finally comes back to Netherfield.
Prompted, we assume, by Darcy clearing up his misconceptions about Jane.
And this time, he doesn't hesitate. He proposes to Jane, and they're engaged. Finally.
But just when things seem settled, another dramatic entrance. Lady Catherine de Bourgh descends upon Longbourn in a fury.
She's heard the rumors about Elizabeth and Darcy, and she is not having it.
She confronts Elizabeth, demanding she promise never to accept a proposal from Darcy, harping on about Elizabeth's inferior status and Darcy's supposed obligation to her own daughter.
It's an outrageous demand. But Elizabeth, now much changed and more confident, refuses point blank.
She stands up to Lady Catherine brilliantly, asserting her own status as a gentleman's daughter and saying Darcy is free to choose, and if he accepts her connections, it's nobody else's business.
It's a fantastic moment of defiance.
And the ultimate irony. According to Mr. Collins' later letter relaying Lady Catherine's rage, her attempt to bully Elizabeth actually backfired.
How so?
It gave Darcy hope. Hearing about Elizabeth's spirited defense of him, it apparently removed his lingering doubts about her feelings. It spurred him on.
Oh, he proposes again.
Yes. And this time, it's completely different. His tone has changed. He acknowledges his past pride, his mistakes, and how her rejection actually led him to reflect and become a better person.
And Elizabeth, whose feelings have also completely transformed thanks to the revelations about Wickham and Darcy's actions for Lydia, accepts him.
They finally talk everything through: his initial awkwardness, her prejudice, his misreading of Jane, Wickham's deceit. They acknowledge their past mistakes and how they've both grown. Elizabeth even jokes that Lady Catherine's interference helped bring them together.
Jane's reaction is pure shock at first, remembering how much Elizabeth used to dislike him.
And Mrs. Bennet's reaction is, well, classic Mrs. Bennet. Complete 180. Suddenly, Darcy's the most wonderful man, all because of his $10,000 a year, and Pemberley, all previous dislike forgotten.
The excerpts also mention Darcy's sister is happy, Lady Catherine is furious for a while but eventually comes around, and the Gardiners become welcome visitors at Pemberley. So it all resolves.
It does. It wraps up the key journeys these excerpts track.
So looking back at just these sections, the journey is pretty clear, isn't it? From snap judgments based on wealth and manners,
Through the dangers of charming appearances and hidden motives.
to the huge pressure of societal expectations, especially around marriage.
And finally, seeing how overcoming pride, confronting prejudice, and allowing for self-reflection can lead to real understanding and happiness.
It really shows that true character isn't always obvious at first glance. It unfolds through actions, choices, and crucially, through mistakes and learning from them.
Absolutely. And while the social rules were rigid, these characters show that individual growth and connection were still possible, even within those constraints.
It definitely makes you think about our own lives, How much weight do we put on those first impressions?
Right. Our own biases, our own little bits of pride or prejudice, stopping us from seeing people clearly.
What might we be missing out on if we don't challenge those initial assumptions?
And it's a reminder, too, I think, that characters, like real people, are complex. Even seemingly negative traits like pride can have different facets and might coexist with genuinely good qualities, as we see so clearly with Darcy's transformation. And Elizabeth's, too.
A really fascinating journey packed into these excerpts. If this deep dive has piqued your interest, definitely grab a copy of the full novel. We've put a link in the description below.
It's absolutely worth a read. And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations like this one.